Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Still Spinning. Tonight's record is Untrue, the second album by Burial, the alias of British electronic musician William Emmanuel Bevan from South London. Burial was the first artist signed to Code 9's Hyperdub label in 2005, and he became known almost immediately for a dark, emotive take on UK electronic styles like garage, two-step, and dubstep. His first album earned critical acclaim, but it was Untrue, released on November 5th, 2007, that became a landmark of electronic music. What makes Burial so distinctive is partly how he makes his music. He composes almost entirely in a simple sound editing program called SoundForge. It doesn't use a grid or a sequencer, so every drum pattern is shaped manually by eye. He's talked about knowing a beat is right when the waveform looks like a nice fishbone. That's why the rhythms feel swung, imperfect, human. You can hear it on the title track, where the kicks seem to gallop and stumble forward. He often builds percussion out of sound effects from the Metal Gear Solid games. Gun reloads, shells hitting the floor, small interface clicks, all processed beyond recognition, but still carrying that faint, tactile grit. Even the famous track Archangel samples music from the intro of Metal Gear Solid 2. Vocals are another signature. Burial pulls samples from everywhere. R&B singers like Beyonce, Ashanti, Usher, Aaliyah, even bedroom YouTube covers recorded through cheap webcams. He pitch shifts them higher or lower until they become ghostly voices, fragments of longing, regret, or intimacy. On Untrue, every track uses vocals in the same way, forming these tiny flashes of emotion that pass through the dark. All of this, the drums, samples, atmosphere, was shaped in just a couple of weeks according to a profile in The Wire by Mark Fisher. And the result is what AllMusic called gloomy, dystopian soundscapes. But they're also warm and strangely comforting. The record was nominated for the Mercury Prize and it influenced an entire generation of electronic musicians. But for me, this album is more than its reputation. The record feels godly in a way, not in a grand religious sense, but like some mystical force that can't fully be explained. You can read about it, someone can describe it to you. You might think that you already know what electronic music is, but then you hear Untrue, and you realize you don't really know anything at all. There are things in life that simply need to be experienced. This album to me is a masterpiece of electronic music, maybe even something close to spiritual. You can talk about it, read about it, analyze it, but Untrue only reveals itself when you sit with it. It's like a quiet encounter with something larger than you, something you just can't quite explain. A presence, a feeling, a higher power made of rain-soaked samples and clipped drums. And like all great records, Untrue plays best from front to back. On vinyl, each side feels like its own small universe, its own EP. It's an album that invites you to not skip around, but to enter, to drift, to let it hold you for a little while. I have to admit my own bias. Burial's music was the soundtrack to a very specific chapter of my life, one that was exciting, difficult, and full of those little moments where you feel like the whole world is happening to you all at once. Music attaches itself to those times. It becomes part of the memory, and Untrue is one of those rare albums where that connection between art and life feels perfectly natural. What always strikes me is how human it sounds. The songs are dark, but there are flashes of warmth, narrow beams of light cutting through gray skies. The samples feel like emotional triggers. The textures feel like weather. Burial layers the world into music. The echo of a train, the hiss of rain, distant voices, a sense of motion. It's not just a record, it feels like listening to music through headphones while walking alone downtown, hearing the city bleed through the mix like a ghostly curtain wrapped around the beat. And on vinyl, you get that added sound of vinyl, which somehow seems meant for it. With a normal band, guitar, bass, drums, vocals, you're hearing a performance. It's something structured, something familiar. But with Burial, it feels like you're hearing music through something else. Faint city noises, memories, and rhythms barely hanging together. It feels like solitude, and yet it's beautiful. It's lonely but comforting. It's simple but bottomless. Untrue is one of those rare albums that seems to come from a place outside of time. The kind of record you don't just listen to, but live inside for a while. And sometimes that's exactly what we need. Thanks for tuning in to Still Spinning. Catch you on the next episode.